Before starting, if you want to access our exclusive BL stories, you can follow our Patreon page. Link in the channel description. So let's begin. He took the suppressant before every shift. Not because he was ashamed of what he was, and not because he had ever given anyone reason to notice. He did it because the moment anyone caught his scent in a room full of valuable objects, the conversation stopped being about the objects. And Cress Whitlow had built his entire life around objects that could be catalogued, verified, and returned to their proper place. He was 24 years old. He worked the night shift at a private auction house that handled estates the public never saw. Old money, old secrets, old families who needed discreet liquidation. His title was forensic archivist, which meant he was the man who touched what no one else trusted themselves to touch. Water-damaged textiles. Mold-edged papers. The things that had survived flood, fire, or simply the slow rot of being forgotten in a basement for 40 years. He liked it. He was good at it. And he had learned, across 3 years of solitary night work, that the dead did not demand anything from him that he was not prepared to give. The ledger arrived on a Tuesday night, packed in a plastic evidence box with a standard chain of custody form clipped to the outside. Flooded estate sale upstate. A property that had sat underwater for 6 days after a storm surge, contents salvaged by a recovery crew that had no idea what they were handling. Cress signed for it without looking up, carried it to his processing station, and cut the seal. The smell hit him first. River water. Mildew. Something metallic that he did not recognize yet. He worked carefully, as he always did. Layer by layer. The outer pages were a loss. Ink smeared beyond recovery. Paper swollen and fragile. He documented each page with his phone camera before attempting any separation. The first 12 folios were what he expected. Estate inventories, tax valuations, the ordinary mathematics of old money being counted. Then he found page 14. The handwriting changed. The ink was different, fresher, applied after the water damage, not before. Someone had gone through this book after it got wet and made additions. Not inventories. Not valuations. Names. Numbers. Accounts. A structure that his archivists I recognized immediately because it was the same structure used by every auction house in the world. But these were not lots. These were payments. He sat back in his chair. The quiet of the archive pressed in around him. Fluorescent hum. The soft tick of the climate control system. His own heartbeat, which he could hear more clearly than he wanted to. He should report it. That was the procedure. Unverified provenance, potential forgery, suspicious content. Escalate to the senior archivist by morning. He knew the protocol. He had written part of it. He turned another page instead. And another. And by the time he reached page 22, he understood that the book in his hands was not a ledger at all. It was a map. And the map led to men who would not want to be found. He closed it. He put it back in the box. He sealed it with the same strap he had cut. And he told himself he would call the senior archivist at 7, when the day shift began. He did not call. He worked the rest of his shift on other items. A Victorian desk with a hidden drawer he found by feel alone. A set of botanical prints that needed rehousing. Normal things. Safe things. Things with no names attached. No structure that smelled like blood beneath the mildew. At 6:30, he clocked out. He walked home through streets that were still dark, the city just beginning to stir. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building with a broken intercom and a landlord who responded to maintenance requests only when the tenant mentioned lawyers. It was not much, but it was his. It had a lock. It had silence. It had a bed he hadn't made in 3 days, and a shelf of books he had read exactly once each, and a small kitchen table where he ate his meals alone. He made coffee. He sat down. He did not turn on the light. The sun rose slowly. Gray. Clouded. A winter sky that seemed reluctant to commit to morning. He was still sitting there when the knock came. Not the front door. His apartment door. At 4 in the morning, a time when no one knocked unless they were dying or delivering news that would make you wish you were. Cress did not move immediately. He had learned, early, that the first instinct was not always the right one. He waited, measured his breath, listened. The knock came again. Softer this time. A palm, not a fist. And then a sound he had not expected. A breath, uneven, drawn through what sounded like clenched teeth. He stood. He crossed the room. He looked through the peephole. The man on the other side was tall, dark-haired. His face was angled away from the door, but even in the distorted fisheye of the peephole, Cress could see the pallor of his skin, the sheen of something that was not sweat. He was bleeding. Cress opened the door. The man turned, and Cress understood, in the same instant, two things that did not belong together. The first was that this man was dangerous, not in the way of a cornered animal, but in the way of a weapon that had not yet decided where to aim. The second was that Cress had already made the choice to let him in. He had made it the moment he stood up from the table. "I need you to finish what you started," the man said. His voice was low, controlled. The voice of someone who was used to being obeyed even when his body was failing him. "The ledger. You saw it. You know what it is." Cress did not ask how he knew. He did not ask how the man had found him. He did not ask any of the questions that a reasonable person would have asked, because somewhere between the archive and this moment, he had stopped being a reasonable person. He had become someone who opened doors for bleeding men and did not look away. "Come in," he said. The man stepped past him, and the scent hit Cress like a wall. Alpha. Not just any alpha. One who was wounded, yes, but beneath the blood and the exhaustion was something older, something territorial and vast. The suppressant in Cress's system held, but only barely. He felt the edge of it, the way a locked door feels the pressure of a hand testing the handle. He closed the door. He locked it. "Where are you hit?" The man was already moving toward the kitchen, one hand pressed against his side. The blood was coming through his coat in a steady, dark bloom. Not arterial, not deadly yet, but close enough that the margin was measured in minutes, not hours. Flank. Stab wound. Missed the kidney by an inch. He sat down heavily in the chair Cress had been sitting in not 10 minutes earlier. "I need it packed and sealed. I can't go to a hospital. I'm not a doctor. Didn't ask you to be one. I asked you to finish what you started." Cress stood very still. The words settled into him like a key turning in a lock he hadn't known was there. "What did I start?" The man looked up at him. His eyes were dark, darker than his hair, darker than the shadows under his brow. And in them, Cress saw something that made his breath catch. "You authenticated the ledger," the man said. "You closed it. You put it back in the box. You didn't report it. You didn't call anyone." His mouth moved into something that was not quite a smile. "You protected it. And that means you protected me, whether you knew it or not." Cress stared at him. "I didn't protect you," he said. "I hesitated. There's a difference." "No," the man said. "There isn't." He said it with such certainty that Cress felt the floor shift beneath him. This man lived in a world where hesitation was the same as allegiance, where not acting was a choice that carried consequences. And Cress, in his small apartment with his silent mornings and his catalogued objects, had just made a choice he did not fully understand. He did not sleep that day. He cleaned the floor. He reorganized his tools. He took the suppressant again, even though he had already taken it the night before, because the scent of Aldric Vane had not faded from the apartment and he needed it gone. He needed everything back in its proper place. But the print stayed on the table. And every time he passed it, his eyes caught on the familiar ghost of his own work, the careful reconstruction of a hand reaching towards something the original artist had not wanted the viewer to see. He went to work that night. He clocked in. He signed the chain of custody forms. He did not open the ledger. He moved it to the deepest shelf in the climate-controlled vault, behind a row of 18th-century bindings that no one had requested in 6 years. He told himself he was securing evidence. He told himself he was buying time. He told himself a dozen things, and believed none of them. 3 days. That was how long it took for them to find him. He was at his workstation, halfway through a condition report on a water-stained map of a city that no longer existed. The fluorescent lights hummed. The climate system clicked on and off. The ordinary sounds of a place that had always felt safe. The front door opened. He looked up. The man who walked in was not Aldric. He was older, broader. His suit was expensive in a way that did not need to announce itself. He moved through the archive like a man who had never been told he could not go somewhere, and his scent, bitter, flat and neutral, did nothing to prepare Cress for the look in his eyes. Cress Whitlow. It was not a question. Cress set down his pencil. Slowly, deliberately, the same way he had learned to handle fragile paper, steady hands, even when the heart was not. Who's asking? The man smiled. It did not reach his eyes. Doreen Ashcroft sends his regards. Cress had never heard that name before, but he felt it land in the room like an object he could not put down. Someone had sent this man. Someone who knew about the ledger. Someone who had decided that Cress Whitlow was someone worth visiting at night. I don't know who that is. You will. The man stepped closer. You authenticated a book recently. Flood Recovery. Upstate Estate. I'm here to retrieve it. Chain of custody forms need to be filed with. I'm not here to file forms. Cress looked at him. He looked at the door. He looked at the clock on the wall, which read 2:47 a.m., and he understood that no one was coming. The archive was empty. The night guard was at the front desk, 2 floors away, probably asleep. He was alone. He opened his mouth to say something, he did not know what, when a sound came from the back of the archive. A door. Opening. The beater turned. Aldric Vane stepped into the light. He was wearing a different coat. His wound was no longer visible. He moved like a man who had never been injured, and his scent, that smoke and cedar gravity, hit Cress across the room like a wave that had been waiting for permission to break. I'll take it from here, Aldric said. He was not speaking to Cress. The beater looked between them. His face flickered, calculation, reassessment, the math of a man realizing he had walked into something he had not been briefed on. Vane, he said. Doreen sent you to retrieve the ledger. You found the archivist. That's good work. Aldric's voice was calm, almost pleasant. You can tell him the ledger is accounted for. And you can tell him the archivist is no longer his concern. The beater's jaw tightened. My orders were to. Your orders just changed. There was no threat in the words. No raised voice. No shift in posture. But the temperature of the room dropped. Cress felt it in his chest. In his suppressed Omega instincts, which had been quiet for so long that he had almost forgotten what they felt like when they woke up. The beater held Aldric's gaze for 3 seconds. Then he looked away. I'll relay the message. He left. The door closed. The archive returned to its fluorescent hum. Cress did not move. He was still holding his pencil. You don't want to know what happens if I leave with you willingly. He had not meant to say it out loud. The words came before he could stop them. Aldric turned to look at him. The distance between them was half the length of the archive, but it felt like less. It felt like something was pulling the air out of the room. I already know the answer, Aldric said. You're not going to make this easy. But you're not going to stay here either. Not anymore. Why? Aldric took a step toward him. Then another. And when he was close enough that Cress could smell the antiseptic beneath the smoke and cedar, he said, because Doreen Ashcroft's men will be back within the hour. And the next time they come, they won't be sending one beater with a message. You're abducting me. I'm moving you. Same thing. No. Aldric's voice was quieter now. A register Cress had not heard before. If I were abducting you, I wouldn't have let you finish your sentence. He held out his hand. Not demanding. Not reaching. Just there, in the space between them, waiting. Cress looked at the hand. He looked at Aldric's face. He looked at the door through which the beater had disappeared. He thought about the print on his table. The man reaching for something just out of frame. He set down the pencil. I need my coat. Aldric's hand did not move. It's already in the car. And that, the fact that he had planned for this, had prepared for Cress's compliance before Cress himself had decided, should have been terrifying. It should have made him run. Instead, it made him step forward. The car was black. Unmarked. The windows were tinted so dark that Cress could not see inside until Aldric opened the door for him. The driver was a beater with a shaved head and eyes that did not linger on anything longer than necessary. They drove for 3 hours. Cress did not ask where they were going. He watched the city thin out into suburbs, the suburbs into farmland, the farmland into coast. The sky was grey. The sea was grey. Everything was grey except for the man sitting beside him, who was darker than any shadow Cress had ever seen. The safe house was a converted lighthouse station on a stretch of coast that had no name on any map Cress had ever used. It was isolated, defensible, the kind of place that someone built when they needed to protect something they could not afford to lose. Aldric led him inside. The rooms were sparse but clean. A bed, a desk, a window that faced the sea. There are clothes in the wardrobe, Aldric said. Food in the kitchen. You have the run of the building, but you do not go outside alone. You do not use your phone. You do not contact anyone from your previous life. And if I refuse? Aldric looked at him, and for just a moment, something cracked through the surface of his composure. Something raw and almost gentle. Then you refuse, he said, and I find another way. He left. The door closed behind him. Cress stood in the middle of the room and listened to the sound of the sea. He stayed. The first 3 days were quiet. He explored the building. He catalogued the contents of the kitchen, the bookshelf, the small collection of medical supplies in the bathroom cabinet. He memorized the layout. He learned the sound of the generator when it kicked on, the rhythm of the guard's footsteps during shift changes, the way the light moved across the sea at different hours. He also learned the sound of Aldric Vane's footsteps, the particular weight of them in the hallway, the pause they always took outside his door. Aldric came to see him every evening. He did not stay long. He asked questions about the archive, about the authentication process, about the damage patterns Cress had documented. Work questions. Safe questions. The kind of questions that kept distance between them. But Cress noticed the way his eyes tracked the room when he entered. The way his scent sharpened when he asked something and Cress took too long to answer. The way he stood, always between Cress and the door. You don't have to guard me, Cress said on the 4th evening. I'm not going to run. Aldric was standing by the window. The sunset was bleeding orange into the grey, the first color Cress had seen in days. I know, Aldric said. You're not the running type. How do you know what type I am? Aldric turned. The light caught his face and made it look almost soft. You didn't report the ledger. You didn't call for help when I showed up at your door. You bound a stranger's wound before you knew his name. He paused. You don't run. You wait. You observe. You act when you're sure. Cress said nothing. Because it was true. 3 months ago, Aldric said, I purchased a damaged Renaissance drawing at an estate auction in Monaco. I didn't buy it because I wanted it. I bought it because I knew who had owned it, and I needed a reason to look at the rest of the collection. The drawing was beyond saving. That's what every restorer I consulted said. He stepped closer. You spent 72 hours on it. You reconstructed a hand from a fragment the size of a fingernail. You gave the drawing back its reach. Cress's throat tightened. He did not know why. You warned the auction house that the provenance was incomplete. You flagged it in the metadata. You did the job you were paid to do, and then you did more. Aldric stopped in front of him. I knew who you were before I knocked on your door. I knew what kind of man you were. The last of the sunset faded. The room darkened. They stood in the grey light, close enough that Cress could feel the warmth of Aldric's body without touching him. Why did you leave the print? Cress asked. Aldric did not answer immediately, but his scent shifted, smoke and cedar, tangled with something that made Cress's suppressed Omega instincts stand at attention. Because I wanted you to know, Aldric said, that I had been watching you long before you needed protection, and I wanted you to decide what that meant. He left before Cress could respond. The night was long. Cress lay awake, listening to the sea. And in the darkness, he admitted something to himself that he had been refusing since the moment he opened his apartment door. He did not want to leave. He did not want to go back to the archive, to the silent mornings, to the life he had built so carefully that there was no room in it for anyone else. Something had taken root in him, and he did not know if it would save him or destroy him. He thought about the man reaching for something just out of frame. He thought about his own hands, steady on fragile paper, bringing back something that had been lost. And he thought about Aldric Vane, who had been watching him long before he needed protection, and who had left the proof on his kitchen table like a question that could not be unanswered. He did not sleep, but for the first time since he had arrived, he did not feel trapped. Aldric came to him at dawn. His face was different. The composure had been replaced by something taut and urgent. "We have a problem." Cress sat up. "What kind of problem?" "Doreen found us." Aldric's jaw tightened. "There's a mole in my organization. They knew where we were. They knew the layout. They knew everything." "How long?" 20 minutes. Maybe less. Aldric held out his hand. The same gesture as in the archive. "I need you to trust me." Cress looked at the hand. He looked at Aldric's face. He heard, in the distance, the sound of approaching vehicles. He took the hand. The tunnels beneath the lighthouse were old. Salt-rotted. Dark. Aldric led him through them with a flashlight and a certainty that Cress did not question. They emerged on the far side of the cliff, where a boat was moored against the rocks. "They'll expect us to run," Aldric said. "They'll expect us to go to ground. So we're going to do the opposite." "What are we going to do?" Aldric looked at him. His eyes, in the grey dawn light, held something that Cress had not seen before. Not possession. Not protection. Affection. "We're going to let them catch us." The boat took them to a coastal town 3 hours south. They traveled by car after that, switching vehicles twice, always moving inland. Aldric did not explain the plan. He did not explain anything. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other pressed against his side. The old wound, still healing, still hurting. Cress watched him. He did not ask. They stopped at a motel outside a town whose name he did not catch. The room had 2 beds, a television bolted to the wall, and curtains that did not quite close. Aldric checked the room methodically, windows, locks, corners, before he sat down on the edge of the far bed. "I need you to understand something," he said. Cress waited. "Dorian Ashcroft is not my only enemy. He is not even my most dangerous one. There are men on the High Commission who have been waiting for a reason to move against me for years. The ledger, the real one, the one you never saw, contains enough evidence to destroy every single one of them." Aldric looked up at him. That is what Dorian was trying to recover. Not the physical book. The information. The names. The accounts. Everything that would give him control over the commission. "But you had the real ledger all along. I had it before you ever touched the forgery." Cress absorbed this. The forgery. The one he had authenticated. The one he had protected without knowing what it was. "You used me." "Yes." The word landed flat and honest. No apology. No justification. "You used me as a decoy. You put me in the archive, with the forged ledger, knowing that someone would eventually come looking. Knowing that I would become a target." "Yes." Cress felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger. Not quite. Something older. Something that had been waiting for this confirmation. "Why me?" Aldric was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Because you were the only person who could authenticate a forgery well enough to make it believable. Because you were invisible enough that no one would notice you until it was too late. Because you were innocent, and that made you the perfect bait." He paused. "And because I had been watching you for 6 months, and I needed a reason to bring you into my world." The last sentence landed differently than the others. Cress felt it in his suppressed instincts, in the place where his Omega had learned to stay quiet and still. "You wanted me in your world. I wanted you in my life." Aldric said it without hesitation, without calculation. The forgery was a convenient excuse. "But I would have found another. I would have found 100 others." Cress stared at him. The room was very quiet. The television hummed. The curtains shifted in a draft he could not feel. "You're telling me this now," he said slowly, "because we're about to walk into something dangerous. And you want me to know the truth before I decide whether to follow you." "Yes. And if I decide not to?" Aldric's expression did not change, but something in his scent, smoke and cedar, undercut with exhaustion, shifted. "Then I find another way to protect you, and I let you go." "Let me go." Cress repeated the words. They felt foreign in his mouth. "You would let me go? After everything?" "I would let you choose." Aldric stood. He crossed the room until he was standing in front of Cress. Close enough that Cress could see the faint scar forming at the edge of his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes, the thing he was holding back with visible effort. "I have spent 15 years building an empire on the backs of men who had no choice. I have taken everything I wanted because I could. But I will not take you. Not like that." Cress looked up at him. The Omega in him, suppressed, controlled, hidden for so long, wanted to reach, wanted to trust, wanted to believe that this man, who had used him as bait and called it protection, was telling the truth. He stood. He did not step back. "Tell me the plan." Aldric's breath caught. Just slightly. Just enough for Cress to notice. "Dorian has you on a broadcast feed. He's going to force you to confess that you forged the ledger on my orders. He's going to broadcast it to every member of the High Commission. It will delegitimize me, fracture my alliances, and give him the opening he needs to move against me. And the real ledger? Already transmitted. 3 separate dead drops. Untouchable. Then what are we waiting for?" Aldric looked at him. The expression on his face was not calculation, not strategy. It was something raw and unguarded, something that Cress had never expected to see on the face of a man like Aldric Vane. "For you," he said. "I was waiting for you to be ready." Dorian's men found them 3 hours later. They came in force, armored vehicles, tactical gear, the kind of operation that announced itself with noise and violence. Aldric did not resist. He raised his hands. He let them take Cress. He let them separate them. Cress was blindfolded. He was driven for what felt like an hour. When the blindfold came off, he was in a room with concrete walls and a single camera mounted on a tripod. Dorian Ashcroft was standing in front of it. He was older than Aldric. His hair was grey, his face lined, his eyes the color of polished stone. He looked at Cress the way a collector looked at an object, assessing, calculating, already assigning value. "The archivist," he said. "You're smaller than I expected." Cress said nothing. "There's a chair behind you. I suggest you sit. This will take a while." Cress did not sit. He stood in the middle of the room, arms at his sides, and waited. Dorian's smile did not reach his eyes. "Stubborn. Good. That will make the confession more believable." The next hour was a blur of instructions, threats, and technical adjustments. Dorian wanted a specific script, a specific tone, a specific set of words that would make the forgery claim stick. Cress listened. He memoized. He said nothing. And when the camera light turned red, he looked directly into the lens and said, "I'm ready." But not for the confession. For the trap. He spoke for 3 minutes. He read the script Dorian had given him. He confessed to forging the ledger on Aldric Vane's orders. He described the process. He named dates and locations. He made it sound real. And then Dorian cut the feed and smiled. "Perfect." Cress looked at him. "You realize this changes nothing." Dorian's smile faltered. "What?" Aldric already transmitted the real ledger. 3 separate dead drops. The forgery you're holding, the one you built your entire operation around, was a decoy. You never had leverage. You never had anything. Dorian's face went still. The calculation in his eyes sharpened, then dulled, as the implications settled into place. "That's not possible." "It's already done." Dorian moved toward him. Fast. His hand closed around Cress's throat. But before he could apply pressure, the door exploded inward. Aldric Vane walked through the smoke like a man who had never doubted the outcome. Behind him, the sound of gunfire was already fading. His men moved through the facility with surgical precision, clearing rooms, securing positions. Dorian released Cress. He stepped back. His face, for the first time, showed something that looked like fear. Vane. Dorian. Aldric's voice was calm, almost conversational. You should have checked the provenance before you staked everything on a forgery. It wasn't a forgery. I had men verify it. I had. You had men who told you what you wanted to hear. Aldric stepped closer. The ledger you built your entire move around was fabricated 6 months ago. I planted it in the estate sale. I made sure your men would find it. I made sure you would chase it. And you did. You chased it all the way here. Dorian's face was white. The commission will. The commission will receive the real data within the hour. Every name, every account, every transaction that ties them to you. Aldric stopped in front of him. You don't have a seat at the table anymore, Dorian. You don't have a table. Dorian's hand moved toward his waistband. Aldric was faster. The shot was clean, precise. Dorian dropped without a sound, and the room fell into a silence that seemed to swallow everything. Cress did not look away. Aldric turned to him. His eyes were dark, his expression unreadable. He was standing over the body of a man he had just killed, and he was looking at Cress as if the only thing that mattered was what Cress would do next. Are you all right? Cress heard the question. He felt it settle into his chest, warm and terrifying. He looked down at Dorian's body. He looked at the camera, still recording. He looked at Aldric Vane, this man who had used him, protected him, watched him, wanted him. I didn't look away, Cress said. Aldric's breath caught. I know. Does that mean something? Aldric stepped toward him. His hand came up, hesitated, then settled against Cress's jaw. The touch was light, almost questioning. It means you're not the man who walked into the archive 2 weeks ago. It means you've chosen. His thumb traced the line of Cress's cheekbone. And it means I don't have to pretend anymore. He leaned in. Cress felt the warmth of him before the kiss, the scent of smoke and cedar, the heartbeat that was faster than it should have been. And when their lips met, Cress understood that he had not been escaping anything when he followed Aldric out of the archive. He had been coming home. The aftermath was not quiet. It was not clean. It was the sound of men moving through corridors, checking bodies, securing evidence. Aldric's organization swept through the facility like a tide, methodical and absolute. Cress sat on a concrete floor with his back against the wall and watched them work. He did not look at Dorian's body again. He did not need to. Aldric found him an hour later. His sleeves were rolled up. There was blood on his hands that was not his own. He crouched in front of Cress and did not try to touch him. We need to move. The commission will have heard by now. They'll be scrambling. Cress nodded. He stood. His legs were steady. That surprised him. They moved through the night. A different car, a different route, a different safe house. This one deeper inland, surrounded by forest instead of sea. Cress slept for 12 hours straight and woke to find a plate of food on the bedside table and a note in handwriting he did not recognize. His in the study. He hasn't slept either. He ate. He showered. He put on clothes that had been laid out for him. A soft sweater, dark trousers, things that fit him better than anything he had ever owned. And he walked through the unfamiliar house until he found Aldric in a room lined with books, staring at a laptop screen that glowed with data he could not read from this distance. You should sleep, Cress said. Aldric looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw shadowed with stubble. He looked like a man who had been running for years and had only just stopped. So should you. I did. 12 hours. Aldric almost smiled. Almost. Show off. Cress crossed the room. He did not sit in the chair across from Aldric. He sat on the floor, beside the desk, close enough that his shoulder was almost touching Aldric's knee. It was not a position of submission. It was a position of presence. I am here. I am not leaving. Aldric looked down at him. The laptop screen cast his face in blue light, making him look younger and older at the same time. The data has been released to the Commission, he said. They're in chaos. 3 of them have already fled the country. 2 are negotiating surrender terms. 1 shot himself this morning. Cress absorbed this. And the traitor. Aldric's jaw tightened. Ives Morrow. My second-in-command for 7 years. He was the one who sold the safe house location to Dorian. He was the one who fed information to the Commission. He has been building his own network inside my organization for 18 months. Where is he now? He's still inside. He doesn't know we know. I've been feeding him false information for the last 3 days, tracking his movements, mapping his contacts. Aldric's voice was flat, but Cress could hear the weight beneath it. I'm going to take him alive. I need to know who else he turned. When? Tomorrow. Cress nodded. He looked at his hands. They were still. They had been still through everything. I want to be there. Aldric's hand stopped moving on the keyboard. Cress. I identified the ledger as a forgery. I walked into Dorian's trap. I stood in front of a camera and lied to the entire Commission. He looked up. I am not a fragile thing you need to protect. I am the reason your plan worked. Aldric stared at him. The silence stretched long enough that Cress thought he would refuse. Then Aldric let out a breath. Long, slow, the sound of a wall coming down. You're right. I know. Tomorrow. You stay behind me. You do exactly what I say. No arguments, no improvisation. Agreed. Aldric looked at him for a long moment. And then, very slowly, he reached down and placed his hand on the top of Cress's head. The gesture was almost paternal, almost protective. But the way his fingers curled against Cress's hair, the way his thumb traced a slow, unconscious line, that was not paternal at all. Thank you, Aldric said, for not looking away. Cress closed his eyes. He leaned into the touch. The next day was orchestrated chaos. Aldric assembled his inner circle in the main hall of the safe house, a converted hunting lodge with a long oak table and windows that faced a forest in winter. 7 men. All alphas. All loyal, or so they believed. Cress stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching. Ives Morrow arrived 10 minutes late. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that seemed designed to inspire trust. His scent was beta, which was part of why no one had suspected him. Betas were invisible, overlooked, underestimated. The perfect profile for a traitor. I heard the operation was clean, Ives said, taking his seat. Dorian's dead. The Commission is in pieces. Congratulations. Aldric did not smile. It was clean, but it wasn't complete. Ives's expression did not change. What do you mean? I mean there's still a snake in the room. The table went silent. The other men exchanged glances. Ives's hand moved, almost imperceptibly, toward his waistband. And Cress saw it. He had been watching. He had been cataloging. It was what he did, the same instinct that let him spot a forged signature at 20 paces. The same attention to detail that had made him the best forensic archivist in the city. He saw the micro-movement. The calculation behind the eyes. The way Ives's weight shifted, preparing to stand. There's a gap in the data stream, Cress said. Every head turned toward him. Ives's eyes went cold. The financial transfers you've been tracking, Cress continued, stepping forward. The ones that led to Ives's contacts. There's one account that doesn't match the pattern. A shell company registered in the Caimans, opened 4 months ago. It's been receiving payments from a source you haven't identified yet. Aldric's eyes met his. There was no surprise in them, just a quiet, terrible pride. How do you know that? I read the data last night, while you were sleeping. Cress stopped at the edge of the table. The account was opened under a name that doesn't appear anywhere else in the records. But the registration date matches the day Ives's son started at a private school in Switzerland. The room went still. Ives's hand was at his waistband now. The calculation in his eyes had sharpened into something desperate. You should have stayed quiet, archivist. He moved. The gun was out before Cress could blink. But he did not flinch. He did not step back. He had spent his life handling fragile things, and he knew that the most dangerous moment was always the one right before they broke. Ives brought the gun up, and Cress stepped forward. Not toward Ives. Toward Aldric. Between Aldric and the bullet, because that was where he needed to be. The shot was loud. Louder than he had expected. He felt the heat of it more than the pain. A sharp, burning line across his upper arm, like a paper cut made of fire. He did not fall. He did not even stagger. He just stood there, between Aldric and the threat. The room erupted. Aldric's men tackled Ives before he could fire again. The gun skidded across the floor. Ives was pinned, disarmed, dragged away, shouting something that no one listened to. But Aldric was not looking at Ives. He was looking at Cress. At the blood blooming through the sleeve of his sweater. At the expression on his face, which was not fear, not triumph, just certainty. You stepped in front of a bullet, Aldric said. I calculated the angle. He was aiming high. The graze was the worst-case scenario, and even that was. You stepped in front of a bullet for me. Cress stopped talking. Aldric crossed the space between them in 3 strides. His hands found Cress's face, his shoulders, the uninjured arm. He was checking for damage, Cress realized. The same way Cress had checked the wound in his own kitchen, weeks ago. Steady hands. Controlled breath. The body moving before the mind caught up. You're bleeding, Aldric said. Superficial. It needs to be cleaned and bandaged. Aldric let out a sound that was half laugh, half something else entirely. You're going to tell me how to treat your own wound. I'm an archivist. I know how to handle damage. Damage. Aldric's hand found the uninjured part of his arm and held. You're not damaged. You're the most intact person I have ever met. He said it like it was the most profound truth he had ever spoken. Cress looked at him. The room was still chaos around them. Men shouting, Ives being taken away, someone calling for a medical kit, but none of it touched them. They were in a bubble of their own making, held together by something that had started with a forged ledger and a wound in a small apartment kitchen. Let me bandage your arm, Aldric said. And then we need to talk. About what? Aldric's hand tightened. His scent shifted. Smoke and cedar and something raw and open, like a wound that had never been allowed to heal. About what happens when you keep stepping in front of bullets for me. And what happens when I stop trying to protect you and start trying to keep you. Cress's breath caught. The suppressant in his system pulsed, weakened. His Omega instincts, which he had buried so deep that he had almost forgotten they existed, stirred like something waking from a long winter. Keep me. Love you. Aldric said it without hesitation. Without calculation. I have been trying not to say it for weeks. I have been telling myself that this was strategy, that you were useful, that the plan required you. But I knew, the night you bound my wound, that I was not walking away from you. I was walking towards something I had never allowed myself to want. The room went quiet. Not because the chaos had stopped, but because Cress had stopped hearing it. He reached up. His hand found Aldric's jaw. The same gesture Aldric had used on him, in the broadcast room. A mirror. A return. I knew too, Cress said. I just didn't know what to call it. You know now. Yes. He leaned in. Aldric met him halfway. The kiss was softer than the first. Slower. It tasted like blood and salt and something sweet that Cress did not have a name for. When they pulled apart, Aldric's forehead rested against his. After Ives is dealt with, Aldric said, after the commission is stabilized, after everything is in order, I want to take you somewhere. Somewhere that has nothing to do with this world. Cress closed his eyes. I've never been anywhere that had nothing to do with this world. Neither have I. Aldric's voice was barely above a whisper. I want to find it together. Cress opened his eyes. He looked at the man in front of him, the blood on his sleeves, the exhaustion in his face, the impossible tenderness in his gaze. Together, he repeated. I think I would like that. The medical kit arrived. Aldric bandaged his arm with hands that were gentler than they had any right to be. And when it was done, Cress stood at the window and watched the winter forest breathe. He thought about the print on his kitchen table. The man reaching for something just out of frame. He had spent his whole life reconstructing things that were broken, cataloging objects that had lost their context, preserving beauty that no one would ever see. He had never expected to be the one being reached for. But here he was. And the hand reaching toward him was steady. And he was not afraid. Aldric's men found the medical kit and set it on the table. Aldric did not delegate the work. He opened the kit himself, laid out the supplies, and took Cress's arm with a gentleness that seemed impossible for hands that had killed a man the day before. The wound was clean. The bullet had cut a shallow trench across the outside of his upper arm, just deep enough to bleed impressively, not deep enough to threaten anything vital. Aldric cleaned it with saline, applied antiseptic, and wrapped it in gauze with the same methodical precision Cress had used on him, in that small apartment kitchen, in what felt like another lifetime. "You're good at this," Cress said. "I've had practice." "On yourself." Aldric's hands paused, then continued. "On people I cared about." Cress watched him finish the bandage. The way his fingers smoothed the edges of the tape. The way his thumb brushed over the skin just above the wrap, as if confirming that it was real. "There's something I need to show you," Aldric said. He did not let go of Cress's arm. He stood, pulling Cress gently to his feet, and led him through the lodge to a room Cress had not entered before. It was small. A desk, a lamp, a single chair, and on the desk, in a plain archival box, the forged ledger. Cress stopped. "You kept it." "I kept it because I wanted to remember." "Remember what?" Aldric picked up the ledger. He held it the way Cress had held it, carefully, with respect for its weight, its history, its lies. "Remember that something I built to destroy ended up giving me something I never knew I needed." He held it out. Cress took it. The leather was still water-damaged. The pages were still swollen. He had spent hours on this book, authenticating it, protecting it, not knowing that it was a trap designed to catch the entire criminal underworld. It had almost cost him his life. It had cost Dorian Ashcroft his. And it had given him Aldric Vane. "I want to burn it," Cress said. "I want to burn it myself." Aldric's eyes did not leave his face. "Then we burn it." They built a fire in the stone hearth of the lodge's main hall. Aldric's men watched from the edges of the room, curious and silent. The flames caught quickly, hungry for the dry paper, and Cress fed the ledger to them page by page. He did it slowly, deliberately, each page a release, each page a choice. When the last page curled and blackened and dissolved into ash, Cress stood back. The heat was warm against his face. The light flickered across Aldric's features, softening them, making him look like something other than the head of a criminal empire. "I'm not leaving," Cress said. "I know you didn't ask. I know you're going to try to protect me by sending me away. But I'm not leaving." Aldric was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. The logs shifted. "I have a wound that won't heal," Aldric said. "An empire in chaos. Enemies on every side. A traitor in custody who knows every weakness I have. I cannot guarantee your safety. I cannot guarantee anything. I know. I may not survive what comes next. I know." Aldric turned to face him. The firelight caught his eyes, made them look like something molten. "And you still want to stay?" Cress looked at him. At this man who had bled on his kitchen floor, who had left a print of a reaching hand, who had pulled him from his quiet life and shown him a world of violence and loyalty and impossible tenderness. "I never wanted to stay anywhere in my life," Cress said. "Not the archive. Not the apartment. Not any of the places I thought I was supposed to want." He stepped forward. "I want to stay here. With you." Aldric's hand came up. It hovered, as it had before, as if he was still learning to ask permission. And when Cress did not pull away, it settled against his cheek. "Then stay." The kiss was different this time. Slower. Deeper. It tasted of ash and salt and the beginning of something neither of them had words for yet. Aldric pulled back. His forehead rested against Cress's. His breath was unsteady. I need to deal with Ives. After that, I need to restructure half the organization. After that, Cress said, we figure out what this is. One step at a time. Aldric let out a sound that was almost a laugh. You're going to organize my life the way you organize an archive, aren't you? No. I'm going to organize it the way I organize a restoration. Cress smiled. Slowly, carefully, one fragment at a time, until it looks like something worth keeping. Aldric kissed him again. Harder. Quicker. A promise. I'll find you when I'm done. I'll be here. Aldric left. The fire crackled. Cress stood alone in the great hall, watching the ashes of the forged ledger settle in the hearth, and he understood that his old life was gone. The quiet routines. The solitary nights. The careful distance he had maintained from everything that might hurt him. He did not mourn it. He turned toward the window and watched the forest darken into evening. Somewhere in the lodge, Aldric was doing what he did, violent, strategic, necessary. And Cress was here, doing what he did, waiting, observing, holding the space for what came next. Ives's interrogation took 3 hours. Cress did not attend. He did not need to. He sat in the small room with the desk and the lamp and the empty archival box, and he looked through the data on the laptop Aldric had left for him. Patterns. Connections. The architecture of a world he was only beginning to understand. When Aldric came back, his hands were clean. His face was tired. He sat on the floor beside Cress's chair and leaned his head back against the wall. He gave up everyone. Every contact, every ally, every plan he had been building. It took longer than it should have, but he broke. Did you enjoy it? Aldric's eyes opened. He looked at Cress. No, I never enjoy it. Good. Aldric reached up and took Cress's hand. He did not say anything else. He just held it, there in the lamplight, as the night deepened around them. This story of Cress Whitlow and Aldric Vane began with a forged ledger and a wound in a small apartment kitchen. It grew into something neither of them had planned. A tangle of violence and tenderness, strategy and surrender. The man who had built an empire on fear discovered that what he wanted most was not power, but the steady presence of a forensic archivist who could look at a bullet graze and call it a paper cut. And the man who had spent his life invisible, cataloging the beautiful broken things of the world, discovered that the most beautiful thing he had ever touched was the darkness, because it reached back. They were not a love story for the faint of heart. They were not clean or easy or safe. They were two men standing on the edge of a world that wanted to destroy them, holding on to each other because letting go had never been an option. And that, in the end, was enough. If you've been following us from that first knock on the door to the night Cress stepped in front of a bullet without hesitation, tap your screen now, because this world isn't done with us yet, and I think we both know it. The fire had burned down to embers. The lodge was quiet. Aldric's hand was still wrapped around Cress's, and somewhere in the distance, the first light of dawn was touching the horizon. Tell me something, Cress said. That print you left on my table. The hand. What was reaching for it? Aldric was silent for a moment. Then he said, You. Cress turned to look at him. I didn't know how to say it then, Aldric said. I didn't have the words. But I had that print, and I knew that if I left it, you would understand. That you would see the hand reaching, and you would fill in the rest. I did fill in the rest. What did you see? Cress looked at him. The lamplight. The shadows. The exhaustion and the hope, tangled together in a man who had never expected to need anyone. I saw someone who had been reaching for a long time, Cress said, and had just realized that what he was reaching for was real. Aldric's grip tightened. His voice, when he spoke, was rough. It is real. I know. They stayed there, on the floor of the small room, as the dawn turned from gray to gold. The forged ledger was ash. The empire was in flux. The traitor was gone. And Cress Whitlow, who had spent his entire life cataloging other people's histories, had finally found one worth belonging to.